Welcome, everybody, to our session today from the Federation of Calgary Communities on building community culture. My name is Paul Minier. I'm the Director of Education here at the Federation of Calgary Communities. I would like to open this learning series with our various organizations present with a land acknowledgement. Really important for us to recognize that we're gathered on the traditional territories of the Treaty 7 Peoples of Alberta. This includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, which includes the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. We're also on lands that are home to Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6. My family are settlers from northeast of the Camrose region. Eventually moved down here and settled in Calgary. I was born and raised in Calgary. I love Calgary, and it's a pleasure to be with everybody here today on Treaty 7. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about this series of conversations. We are joined today by Hillhurst Sunnyside Community Association. We have Katie Durr from Hillhurst Sunnyside. We have Joanne from Hillhurst Sunnyside, and they have also partnered with an organization called Habitus Collective. And so we have Gayatri and Nadia as well. So welcome to everybody from the Hillhurst Sunnyside team and the Habitus team. And then we have Jenny Lee Smith as well, the president, the ever so fabulous, I'm going to say it, Jenny May, the ever so fabulous president of Braeside Community Association as well. For those present today and those who are viewing this through our Get Engaged newsletter, because we're going to be sharing these stories throughout the network, we will be recording the Hillhurst Sunnyside and Habitus story first, and then we'll take a pause and we're going to stop that recording, and then we'll resume our part two with Braeside so that we've got smaller, digestible conversations from both organizations that we can share throughout the network through video. So thank you for everybody to everybody for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over now and welcome Katie Durr from Hillhurst Sunnyside Community Association to start part one of our conversation around building community culture. Welcome, Katie.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to share the slides here, and then Joanne is going to come on to introduce us here.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I'd like to introduce two partners that we've worked with at Habitus Consulting Collective, Inc. So we have Gayatri Murtha, who's a co-founder and also the principal researcher, as well as Dr. Nadia Ansara, senior research associate. And our journey started a few years ago before my attendance here. I am new here to Calgary and to Hillhurst Sunnyside. I'm the executive director. I've been here for 6 months now. And it was really wonderful coming into this work that was already well on the way. And so Gayatri is going to be walking us through the initial working, how the partnership came together, from the audit, how it came to training. Katie is going to, with Hillhurst Sunnyside, she's our community projects coordinator. She is going to walk us through the training aspects of it through the organization. And then I'm going to bring it up at the end of where we are today, part of the governance pieces and some of the small wins, how we're moving this work forward. So I'll turn it over to you, Gayatri.
Thank you so much, Joanne. So as Joanne mentioned, we wanted to tell you the story of this work because quite often when we do work around anti-racism and equity, there is a lot of concern and fear, both with organizations that are taking on this work, but then in a climate where there isn't a lot of resources and funding, we wanted to share a story of how things can be done and what lessons we've learned along the way. So it's a fairly sort of hopefully hopeful story and positive story that other associations and folks listening can learn from as well. So this project really came about and it is rooted in HSCA's commitment to providing services that are accessible, that are equitable, And it was also occurring at a time when there was a huge sort of understanding and reckoning happening within the city at large, and recognizing that equity could not be a side project, but it had to be central to the work we do. And at HSCA, there was a funding that came through that was focused really on understanding how are the organizations, processes, and policies currently existing, and how this can be strengthened using an equity lens. Now, also, there was an understanding that there was a very diverse staff at HSCA, and they are serving a very diverse community. So there were two sort of key pieces to the puzzle as well. And so this increasing change and shift at the larger city sector as well as within the organization prompted this work. And when we came in, they recognized that there were going to be two parts of the puzzle, which we'll talk a little bit. One is a more formal audit process, and then the other is to actually talk to the staff and leaders at HSCA. The next slide, please. So we always talk about it as a journey because as we went along, we were building the ship in a way. So we had a general sense that this is a community association which had a long history. It had policies, it had a strategy, and the goal was, okay, can you put an equity frame on it and look at it? And it's really important to unpack what does that mean. So it means that we don't just go in and say, here are the gaps or here are the problems, but really ask the question that if you want to have outcomes that are equitable for diverse, racialized people within the community and within the staff, what should an organization look like? And, by asking that simple question, it opened up so many different, topics, some of which were like, what does this word equity even mean? How do you translate it into a community association context? There were lots of questions about how can we make this practical and feasible, and also address a lot of the fears and concerns of staff who said, does this mean I will now have to do a lot more work or adjust to a whole set of new ideas? And so when we started to do the phase one of the work, we really tried to understand, okay, when you just look at the policies and procedures, do these terms show up? How do they show up? How are they defined? Are they well defined? Is someone being held accountable to do the work? And how are you tracking progress? After which we went on to do the phase two part of this work, which was really talking to people within the organization. We spoke with staff, we spoke with the board, we spoke with the leadership, and we also did a staff survey and some interviews. And through this process of, talking to the folks within the organization, we understood how these policies and procedures were put into practice, because that is the biggest challenge, right? Like sometimes you may have the best policies, but it is in the day-to-day activation that people run into challenges, they raise questions, and it was a sort of an important feedback because we're working with a limited set of resources, limited space. You had to prioritize what gets actioned when, and folks were also on their own learning journeys. So while sometimes policies existed, they were not understood. Sometimes they were understood, but they were not practiced. Sometimes they were practiced, but they were not consistently applied. Sometimes they were consistently applied, but there was no really good storytelling. So you can see there are lots of places that you move from, designing something to actually activating and sharing it. Next slide, please. So the last phase of this work, and then I'm going to hand it off to Katie to really talk about what was happening behind the scenes, was that then one of the big pieces that came out from all of this conversation was like, we all have different understandings of what it means to do equity work. What are these basic concepts? And they came back to Habitus with raising some more money, which again is amazing for a community association to remain so committed to this work. That they said, we really want staff and board members and leadership to take some basic training. And originally, some of the goals was get everybody to talk about what these concepts mean. There are lots and lots of trainings available, but what we found was either they were too academic or they were too abstract, and they did not cater really to a community association context. You had folks who were staff, you had folks who were volunteers, folks from different walks of life. So we wanted to make sure the language was simple, accessible. There were stories, there were videos, and it was a conversation starter. Really, it was to bring people into conversation about the training. And this sort of really spearheaded a conversation of what should these definitions be. So sometimes we would present the definitions and then staff and board and leadership would debate them or discuss them. And through that, the goal was to continue to build a deeper understanding. We also wanted an easy resource that Joanne or Katie could use as new staff and volunteers came in. And then we wanted to create a sort of a package that folks could use anytime they were, addressing a problem. Because that was one of the biggest pieces that came out of all of this work is it's well and good to talk about equity, but how do you embed it into the everyday work of a community association? So I'll stop here and I'll pass it back to Katie to provide us some more context.
There we go. So I'll go back to this slide here. These were the modules that were discussed during the training program with Habitus, just briefly there. And they were able to give us a couple different modules and we were able to choose a few. But one of the things, as we said, this was a first time doing, at least when I've been around, and I have been at HTC around a year, but this was the first time that we had really taken a deeper look at these different modules, and we were able to choose a few that would work well with our staff. But one of the learnings from that was there's so much information to choose. And so if one were to do this again, I would recommend really honing down, maybe even on 3 or 2 modules. That was learning. So I will continue on from there. So we received funding from Calgary Foundation, and that let us continue the work that had been started from the audit we did 2 years ago. And in working with Habitus, we decided to do 5 training sessions, 4 groups, and have an additional resource from our time together. So as you can see from the slide, we separated with admin and facility staff, childcare staff, board of directors, those were our volunteers, leadership and management. We did 2 sessions with the leadership and management. This was a smaller group, and the intention behind this was to provide space for them to talk a bit more about the organizational policy and structure around DEI. And then we also had a self-study option that was used. It was a slide deck that was used throughout these training sessions, uniquely designed for each group. But then the larger slide deck is a resource for us so that anyone that wants to dig deeper into certain topics can go there. But then it can also be a self-study option for those who weren't able to make the training date or for those who are being onboarded as new staff. So these groups were partially created to accommodate schedules, but also to be mindful of power dynamics between senior management and their direct reports. So we are aware that some staff might not feel comfortable speaking about equity at their workplace when their boss is in the same room. So having separate groups partially address this. And I say partially because the management team were still with their directors, who were their supervisors in the leadership and management group. So we didn't fully address all the power dynamics. And that was another learning for us in this process. So our goal with these training sessions was to give space for staff to address areas at HSCA that needed to grow in equity. And it also was to equip our team as they continue to work to create equitable and inclusive programs and services to our diverse community. So here on this slide, I have some more of our reflections from our anti-racism and equity training that I'd like to share with you. So first, we had a leadership transition. So the audit was initiated and led by Kate Stenson, our former executive director. And she was also one of the leaders in getting this grant for this project. And then our new executive director, Joanne Schlossler, which you'll hear from right after me, she came in on the tail end of our training. So not the most ideal circumstances is to have a leadership transition during training such as this that needs to be led by and championed by leadership of your organization. But because it started before Joanne came, it did set the tone for her. And she is an advocate, as you'll hear after, and champion of this. And so she was able to come into HSCA and speak on this right away, just because the groundwork had already been laid. So from that, like, even if you do a training and it might feel like not a lot maybe came out of the sessions, or it felt like a tick box, setting the groundwork for even leadership to have these conversations is huge. Oh, sorry, I'll go back. One of the other learnings was just the ongoing dialogue that happened. Because this training was going on for 4 months, different groups at different points in time, it was a topic of conversation that was on the surface for 4 months. So obviously we hope these are ongoing conversations, but having training sessions that were over a span of time actually allowed for the content to marinate and for staff to talk with each other. I'd say much of the learning happened in between sessions. So coworkers felt that they could talk a bit more candidly and ask questions with trusted coworkers. And this is also important to note, that not everyone feels comfortable to ask questions or talk about this in a large group or setting with everyone there. So a lot of the learning happens in between. The other piece that we navigated was varied levels of diversity, equity, inclusion knowledge and engagement. So some were really knowledgeable, had done, university courses around feminism and different topics, and others, this was a newer concept and maybe they have some lived experience, or others more actually express hesitation to this and share that they didn't really want to use their working hours for doing more training and whatnot. So you're getting many different people with different knowledge levels. So whatever training you might bring to your community association or organization, it probably won't hit everyone. And just knowing that off the bat is helpful. So yes, all in all, the training in combination with new leadership who continue to champion equity and diversity led to some good steps in the right direction, but also lots of learnings along the way that we wanted to share with you if you decide to enter on this journey. So I'm going to pass it over to Joanne, who is going to share a bit more long-term practical implementations that have helped us move the needle on equity and anti-racism organizationally.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, so this piece, the forward backbone, we called it. When I came in, we were just starting to do the board governance training pieces of it. So it was looking at this work from a governance level. And that was another piece that was very much tailored to the organization. Gayatri and I were able to meet and discuss this, and meeting the new leader coming in too, so she could get a sense of what is the tone I might be coming in with. And if she was going to have to do the work of trying to engage me in this process. So it was very easy on my front. This work is very near and dear to my heart all throughout my career. And one of the first wins that we were able to do was to put this statement at the beginning of every single contract of employees coming in who want to sign on. It's not buried in the fine print at the end of a contract or in the legalese, but it's front and center. So it's about we embody anti-racist, anti-oppressive, equity-seeking practice in all aspects of work, including with participants, community members, volunteers, neighbors, staff, stakeholders, networks, and others. And the reason for the breadth of that is because that builds the backbone pieces of it. So it's whoever we engage with, this needs to be in our thought process. It needs to be in our actions, how we work. So we went through the board training. The other piece that was really nicely aligned is the audit info that came out from Habitus was beautiful big cards that we had, and they'd been sitting in the back room safely while all the transition was going on. So I brought that out. We had an all staff retreat that we held. I brought them out again to re-engage staff to it and to see where we were at that moment in time in April. Were we hitting the marks? Were we not? New staff coming on were now made aware and could give their input. Use the good old, red, green, yellow stickers, made it very practical. Everybody was engaged. And the other small wins that we were able to do was we updated that. We have the contract piece of work going. And then from the board training in our annual report this year, they were able to put in writing that the backbone of decision-making, anti-racism and EDI work was going to be the backbone of our decision-making. So they publicly stated it in an audit. So those are the small, easy steps, practical steps that can be taken. The forward momentum now coming out of the retreat, staff were quite excited about it. And there was also discussion about potential champions within the organization who would help keep this forward. And as an executive director, and as the board, not demanding that this work gets done, because the forward movement is about building it forward together. It's not a strategy, it's a way of being. So there's a real difference in that part. So strategies there's input, and then you're just driven to, okay, got that part done, got that part done. But this is about really being intentional on a way of how we operate and interact with each other. So that's the part that we're moving forward, and we'll have continual, like yearly for sure. It'll be a very deep process that we go through each time, but there'll be built-in conversation pieces throughout, and there's discussions about potential brown bag lunches where people can still come together and maybe discuss certain issues, bring in some speakers as we develop it. So that'll be done with staff as well. So that's the excitement about this. And staff have come to me myself as a new leader as well, and had really clear, really clear discussions and questions, and can I, or have we thought about kinds of things. So it is moving forward. It has landed for many staff, and the opportunity of having it packaged that's there to be able part of staff orientation is really, really critical in this work as well. That's all I'd like to share for now. Yeah, it's a forward movement piece. It's not a solo journey at all. And we definitely will be connecting again with the partners at Habitus too, to make sure that we are also on track in being accountable to ourselves.
Great. And if you're interested in doing something similar in your community association or just want to chat, I'm happy to talk. You can email me at katie@hsca.ca. Oh, hsca.ca. That's correct. 2 CAs. So you don't forget it. And that's all from us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie and Joanne and Gayatri and everybody from Hillhurst Sunnyside who supported this and Habitus. Uh, Katie, I want to ask you a question, and I'm inspired by this work. This is something that I'm very dedicated to in my life, both professionally and personally as well. I know that Kate Stenson helped put these things in motion prior to seeking new opportunities and moving on. But the Federation was contacted. The Federation was contacted by Hillhurst, Sunnyside, and Habitus in this work and said, we have a story to tell. We have a story to tell, and we're looking at this sort of organizational culture piece, and we believe that this is a story that should be told. And while we can't speak for Kate here today, I'm just sort of wondering if a part of that spark is, if you could speak to that, like coming forward and sharing this story and wanting to promote this work to the network was very much something that your team felt passionate about, and we were passionate about supporting that. So I'm just sort of curious if you could speak to that for a moment about, bringing this to the network and why you believe that was important.
Well, I wasn't here at the inset, of course, and Kate, big shoes to fill. I can
Yeah,
definitely attest to that. But I think what that does is the culture it set is it speaks to it not being a system. It speaks to it of human to human, a way of being. And I did get to meet Kate, sorry, on a number of occasions and had some good conversations. And I think I can speak for her on saying that this is something that is important, especially given now the challenges globally that's going on and some of the vitriol that's starting to return back again, that it's really important that we can't do this work alone. We need to reach out as networks, and we need to support each other in moving this forward.
wonderful. I couldn't have put it better myself. I remember talking to Kate and saying, "You've come to the right place." We are so dedicated to this work, and we're excited to share
Mhm.
your story. So thank you for your time. Thank you to Hillhurst Sunnyside today, and thank you to Habitus for helping share the story. And we're looking forward to sharing this